It's President Jacob Zuma's turn now in terms of love letters to the ANC members. Jacob Zuma has just responded to President Cyril Ramaphosa on his letter that he wrote to the ANC through the media, obviously for everyone to be able to see the letter. And now this letter of President Jacob Zuma, where he states within the content of the letter that this letter is solely written to the president and all the members of the ANC, the branches and so forth, and that he's hoping that the letter is not going to be leaked out. But obviously the letter came out to the public, so he had all his ducks in a row in terms of saying, I'm writing this letter for ANC cadres, for us to deal with this issue within the channels of the ANC. Unlike you, Mr. President Ramaphosa, where you've now just washed and hanged our dirty linen in public. And one of my favorite things in this letter is President Jacob Zuma now talks about individualism. Amazing. The ethos of you open republic society, democratic republic society, where we have individual responsibilities. If you've committed a crime as an individual, you then have to face the consequences and be accountable individually in this instant. But remember, he always talked about the collective. President Jacob Zuma is, or any member of the African National Congress. Speaking of letter, also, Andile Lungisa has written a letter to the top 6 requesting them to send that letter to the Integrity Committee of the ANC in order to deal with CR17 issues of private funding, the opening of that account where almost $1 billion was donated into Mr. President Ramaphosa's CR17 campaign, of which there's been elements and articles about individuals whom, when they've donated for the CR17, later on they pop up into the cabinet, into state-owned enterprises, positions, and so forth. And remember, the name of the donors were sealed. Some purported that they were also the judges and magistrates who also donated, and it's becoming a little bit murkier, and the battle rages on. And all this fellows, Andile Lungisa, remember, he stepped down from the mayoral committee for engineering and infrastructure because of he smashed a jug full of water into a DA opponent. So he said he had stepped down. Apparently, he says that he's been convinced by the ANC Secretary General to step down, keep it clean. And then when he is then vindicated, then it's when he could then come back. And I guess this is one of the reasons why he's purporting to say that the same should be done with President Cyril Ramaphosa, to come clean. Interesting with this smashing of the jug full of water and the fighting and all of that. Andile Lungisa is a boxing fan. Sort of remind me of Floyd Mayweather when it comes to the best defensive boxer ever. There's a young man, if I need to just divert a little bit, he's a boxer. He's from Eastern Cape. Whenever he fights, Andile Lungisa would be there. He hops into the ring and so forth. And the young man's name is Azinga Fuzile. he's the future, despite being robbed by Shavkat Rakhimov, who then came in here in SA and used some smelling salt in the middle of the fight, where it sort of looked like he came back fresh to life again and replaced himself with his clone to fight and beat Azinga Fuzil. The other issue also is of the gentleman whom it was said that in the National Executive Committee meeting said that Mr. President Cyril Ramaphosa must also resign. He must show leadership by resigning, as they were having heated argument with regard to the letter. That's Tony Ngeni. Any of you remember was this Mercedes-Benz which was dubbed Tony Ngeni? Because of that, Mercedes-Benz was awarded to Tony Ngeni as one of the little side goodies from the arms deal. I remember when he also, speaking of boxing, when he was also being lifted up over the shoulders when he was taken to jail, and he's back again in the thick of things. And the other news in this heated factional fight between the CR17 and the Zuma faction is of Ace Mahashul. He had an interview, I think, on Newsroom Africa, where he says, no, I'm not going to be stepping down if there's allegation of fraud and corruption against me, just for a mere allegation. If you look at that interview, yes, he was right about saying you can't just step down because you've been accused of allegations of fraud and corruption. All you have to do is have your day in court. But the ANC's National 54th Conference stated that when there are allegations against you, you should step aside. So I don't know how they're going to work around it, because there's this cloak and dagger and rough and tumble dirty fights within the ANC faction, where you can make up story about another individuals to have committed fraud and corruption strategically, maybe in the cabinet, maybe in the provincial executive committee, and then that person will step aside, and then the other person will come and make such allegations. So you have your opponents to just step aside, fill in the void, and then navigate and steer the ship into your faction direction in order for your faction to win. So we having these two elephants fighting hard and destroying the grass that we need desperately in order to survive, as a fodder for us, just to use a metaphor there. Let's get into this letter, a little bit, the letter of President Jacob Zuma. It's quite interesting. I love it how he talks about individual responsibility when the time suits him now, whereas earlier on he wouldn't talk about individual responsibility. So it's getting more and more dirty. I'm going to read few excerpts on this. I'm not going to read the whole thing. Mr. President, I address this private letter to you as the president of the ANC and request that you share it with the entire leadership as well as structures of our movement. I also hope that my letter will be kept as an internal communication directed at the leadership and the entire membership. In your letter, in which you state what you view as one of the greatest challenges since the advent of democracy, I had to go back to the thesaurus, to the dictionary on this, and said, whoa, what is the advent of democracy? So, yeah, the great command of the Queen's language here by Honorable the President Jacob Zuma. You regrettably place the scourge of corruption right at the doorstep of ordinary members of the ANC, most of whom are the urban and rural poor working class people who have never abused state resources. In their numbers, they live in abject poverty, waiting for the ever elusive better life for all you and I promised them. So he talks about this better life for all, one of the ANC's slogans, whom he now say himself as well as President Cyril Ramaphosa are responsible for, because the people are still poor, and the better life for all is elusive to them. And we all know that who's been in charge for over 25 years. Mr. President, your letter is fundamentally flawed in several respects and plays right into the hands of those who seek to destroy the ANC and build from its ashes a counter-revolutionary party under the guise of fighting corruption. I am certain that this is not your intention. Mr. President, apart from the fact that your letter betrays a lack of understanding of how the leadership of the ANC should communicate with its structure, it is absolutely unjustified to attribute to the entire ANC and its ordinary members misconduct of few individuals that have access to state power and its resources, as well as ANC leadership position. You hear that? So now he's stating that the current president doesn't understand the workings of the African National Congress. So accusations, the ANC faction is rearing on. It's crazy. And by the way, this happens amid a new launch of a political party which was formed by Mr. Herman Mashaba just yesterday in South Africa. Mr. President, by stating that the ANC stand accused number one in respect of the charge of corruption, you implicate thousands of innocent members of the ANC who continue to face hunger and dehumanizing poverty and have never benefited from corruption. You proceed to say the ANC should bury its head in shame. So here he's saying that the ANC president, Cyril Ramaphosa, is accusing the entire thousands and thousands of members of the ANC. Notice he's not saying members of the people of South Africa, because this letter is purported to be written to the ANC branches, to be shared by the ANC branches by the president. And remember, the 54th conference spoke about a lot of vote buyings, where branches are being bought by people with rich and deep pockets. So when they go to the conferences, brown paper bags come out, you're given money in order to be able to vote for your side, which they said it's something that they have to deal with. So these thousands and thousands of members who are there, whom are being said that they are poor, are they getting money? Mr. President, this statement that you make is not helpful to the ANC in my respectful view. For all intents and purposes, it can only serve to destroy the ANC, particularly if the head of the ANC pleads guilty on behalf of the ANC and calls the ANC the accused number one. Your actions are unprecedented in this regard, Mr. President. You are indeed the first president of the ANC to stand in public and accuse the ANC of criminality, and that the ANC must be accused number one as accusations of corruption mount. To put it frankly, I've never seen a leader of a political party who comes out and criticizes that political party, no matter how whack, no matter how disgusting that political party is. So it might have been sort of a calculated appeal, obviously, to the masses of the Republic of South Africa, that we as the ANC are guilty of everything. We want to atone from our sins. Hey, the next local elections are around the corner. We are going to change. We're collectively dipping our head and in shame and so forth. So, but that is not working, as you can see, because now other factional members are countering this letter, and rightfully so. You will never see a political party speaking in public and saying that we're doing bad to the public. You are indeed the first ANC president since its formation in 1912 to stand in public and accuse the ANC as an organization, and to say the ANC must bury its head in shame. This is a devastating statement coming from a sitting president of the organization and head of state. I view your letter as a diversion, a public relations exercise by which you accuse the entire ANC in order to save your own skin. You write, for your own desires to plead for white validation and approval, the worst betrayal of Oliver Tambo, Nelson Mandela, Walter Sisulu, Govan Mbeki, and others who sacrificed their own freedom for the ANC. With your pen, you desecrate the graves of young men and women who lived and died cruel death in the hands of apartheid, security forces, and mercenaries. These heroes paid the highest price fighting for our freedom and in defense of the ANC. We should therefore never implicate them when we as individuals are accused of corruption and misconduct. I love it. Individual responsibility, no longer collective responsibility. Throughout, as the leader of the ANC, Mr. President Jacob Zuma always says the ANC comes first. We take collective decisions, but today is talking about individual responsibility as countering Mr. President Cyril Ramaphosa's view of trying to get an appeal to the society for him to be seen as someone who's doing something within the same political parties of which all the factions are accused with serious fraud and corruption. This is interesting. You notice he says you write for your own desires to plead for white validation and approval. So this letter not only now of President Jacob Zuma accuses President Cyril Ramaphosa to write for the branches in public for us to see him being transparent, and how he's now saying the ANC's kind of taking responsibility for the fraud and corruption that has been happening through the PPE deals and so forth. Mr. President Zuma now is saying that he wants to be validated by white people when he writes this letter. Continues, many in white circles that are fond of you and seek to minimize your errors will fill their barrels of ink and sharpen their pens to condemn me for expressing my views. They will, through their infamous grand narrative, write a series of opinion pieces to diminish the significance of the issues I raise. In your defense, Mr. President, some in the mainstream media hire opinion makers to formulate negative stories in order to divert attention from the issues I raise, as it has happened in the past. I expect them to do so. However, they are the least of my consideration at the moment, and I do not seek validation or approval from them. So again, he says many in white circles that are fond of you. So here, obviously, the majority of liberal medias, liberal writers, liberal journalists are fond of Mr. President Ramaphosa. I saw a couple of articles that were say, no, it's not Mr. President's fault when he's closing down the liquor stores and so forth. It is you, citizens' fault. You've done this to yourself. You've been drinking and driving. You've been stabbing each other with knives and having gunfights and filling up the hospitals where there wouldn't be no capacity and spaces for people who will be infected with the communist China virus to be taken care of. The likes of Adrian Basson, who's the editor of News 24 and so forth. I'm simply requesting that each one of us must face as individuals allegations leveled against us without implicating our movement or naming it accused number one or asking it to bury its head in shame. When individuals are being challenged for their action, presently formulated, your letter lends credence to the suspicion that you seek to assist those in our ranks involved in the attempt to destroy the ANC in order to hand it over to be a tool of a white monopoly capital interest. So here it is again. So this is a theory, a conspiracy theory, where President Zuma now accuses Cyril Ramaphosa of having some folks within the movement who are then, in a way, working day and night to destroy the ANC and then handing it over to the white monopoly capital. You know, monopolies means one business corporation. We don't have one giant business corporation. Maybe if he said duopoly capital or oligopoly capitals, maybe 10 or 15 corporate companies then which are friends with those people in the ANC that are working together in order to destroy small businesses and medium enterprises, and at the same time giving fund to those few ANC elites who want to destroy the ANC, handing it over to the white monopoly capital, the so-called, which it's something that would not make sense, because the whole nation is watching as the ANC is cratering like it's a fallen satellite that's just going to crash and burn and be blown into small smithereens, small pieces, and then say that white monopoly capital, here is your ANC. I mean, it will be ANC which nobody would then be voting for. So this doesn't make sense. Anyway, Mr. President, in all the years of persecution by the state for allegation of arms deal, corruption, and currently the new narrative of the famous state capture, I have never implicated the ANC or its member in order to clear my name. I faced those charges alone and have become the scapegoat as many of you continue to enjoy the riches that white monopoly capital continue to bless you with. Continues the narrative. I faced those charges alone and have become the scapegoat as many of you continue to enjoy the riches that white monopoly capital continues to bless you. I continue to carry alone the load of what you and those who catapult you have regrettably called the 9 wasted years, and the president and the persistent narrative of state capture that you and those to whom you have handed the ANC used to scapegoat me for all that is evil in our country. Maybe, Mr. President, this is the opportune time to tell our members whether during the so-called 9 wasted years any of your companies ever did business with government, national or provincial, while you were deputy president of our movement and the country. This would help you, Mr. President, to dispel this unfortunate allegation, sometimes directed at you. It is individuals from the ANC who must bury their heads in shame, not the ANC, our glorious movement. And the letter continues on and on and on and on and on. So you can see this has just it's on. The ANC had failed to realize that while they are having a raging civil war within their ranks, the people are looking at them, especially through this PPE issue, which is just a huge cloud, which is now everyone who's not even politically inclined is looking at it and saying, wow, people are getting millions and millions. Some are getting hundreds of millions within the very same faction. People who are now closed and who are in the cabinets and who are within President Ramaphosa's presidential office are getting those tenders while he's talking tough against corruption. Folks on Jacob Zuma's faction side are getting those PPE deals, the like of Ace Makashule's sons, and it continues. People like Florence Radzelani, who was in the news in terms of VBS now. It said that her daughter also now got a PPE tender. Whether they got it legally or illegally, even now as Miss Florence Radzelani is now going to be reinstated to being back at work with regard to the VBS report, and Mr. Msiza now, rightfully so, who has been cleared in court at the moment because he was not being given a chance by Terry Mutaus when he was writing reports. Now Mrs. Radzelani's daughter's got a tender, a PPE tender. I mean, sometimes it's an issue of perception of conflict of interest and corruption and fraud that might be being seen by the community or by the people of South Africa, that, you know what, I'm not going to continue doing this. I'm going to lay low a little bit, but it's not happening. And you can understand that both these factions also have to get money and be able to afford huge lawyers, whom, even if there's something where you and me, ordinary people who don't have this amount of money, if we go to court, we're going to be losing court cases, or we won't be having enough money to be able to fight all the way to the highest court in land. So they have to have ammunition. And Again, I forgot to mention also that obviously Mr. President's son, is it Andile Ramaphosa, also got a deal, as much as it was with a bank for having taxis, ventilators, a deal where he got about 6 million rand so far, after having sent about 500,000 rands into the Ramaphosa CR17 campaign and the whole debacle that they had in Parliament, an issue which was raised by Musi My Money. You would think that they will lay low and not seen to, have this conflict of interest continue, but it doesn't stop with the ANC. So we'll see what's going to be coming out of the National Executive Committee fight during this weekend, and my guess is that they will come through in a press conference and say everything is all hunky-dory as this train is hurtling towards next year's local elections and trying to salvage themselves to the 2024 national elections, where, remember, the previous elections, they've also reduced their percentage in terms of the electorate. So we'll see. My name is Mamuji, and thank you for watching the Mamuji Show, and I'm out.